Hi friends, and welcome to Poverty Proof, how the rich think differently and how you can train your brain for wealth. If you're in the southern hemisphere, happy Spring Day to you. Although we kind of got the Game of Thrones version of Spring Day today. So ironically, here we are in the south and kind of in the true north. All very confusing. Question for today: can you get rich writing books? Answer: well, yes and no. Let's talk about how books interact with wealth, and they do so in two interesting ways. The first is that creating a book follows one of the greatest wealth-building formulas of all, which is to say, you build it once and sell it many times over. Now, there is no guarantee built into that particular formula because it depends on whether or not people actually buy your book, which entails A, you have to write a good one, B, a great deal of marketing and PR must then follow in order to get the message out there and encourage people to buy it. However, the basic underpinning formula is sound. It is a product that you make once, sell many times over. That entails an investment of time and of all of your cost once off. After that, everything becomes profit and it can multiply. But it doesn't end there. It also impacts on your expert positioning. When you write a book on a topic, you become a sort of insta-authority on that topic. It leads very naturally to things like media interviews, talks in front of groups of people, and it can pull your life in the direction of the topic matter of the book. Now, of course, that's something you can use strategically and to your own advantage. If you want to be the authority on, or if you want to be the consultant to, then what you do is to strategically write that book, and it creates your branding and pulls your life in that direction. Now, some exciting news. I've been saying over the past couple of videos that I put together a mini seminar on how to write and publish a non-fiction book. I have had 12 books now commercially accepted for publication. 10 of them are out. One is about to come out in the next couple of weeks, I believe it is. That is titled Political Correctness Does More Harm Than Good. And then one is scheduled for release for next year, January, written to completion for Penguin and going through the editing process right now. So 12 commercially published books over 3 continents and 4 publishers. Those are my writing credentials. As a result of that, I put together a just shy of 2-hour mini seminar on how to write your book and how to go about getting it published. So, if part of your expert positioning, your brand building, or your product mix is the idea of a book, I'd like you to write a good one. To that end, I'd like to share with you a couple of the chapters out of the book on how to dramatically improve the standard, quality, and effectiveness of your writing, so that when you use it to position yourself as an expert, you've got something good on your hands. And also so that it will incentivize the maximum number of sales. The better the book, the better it will tend to sell. Without further ado, I give you the complete, tiny little guide to becoming an author.
How do I write to a high standard of quality? Now let's get into the actual writing. How do you ensure that you do a good job of the craft? You'll excuse me if I assume we don't need to cover basic grammar here. I'm going on faith that you can write a sentence. But how do you write a good sentence? I'm a bit of a nerd about language. I adore it. A great passage by James Michener, or perhaps Tolkien, can make me close my eyes in shivery wonder. Shall we indulge one? Why not? If you're an aspiring writer, chances are good you have at least a healthy respect for the English language. Here is a conversation between Gandalf the Wizard and the Fellowship after his return from fighting the fiery Balrog in the mines of Moria in the first book of The Lord of the Rings. Deep is the abyss that is spanned by Durin's bridge, and none has measured it, said Gimli. Yet it has a bottom beyond light and knowledge, said Gandalf. Thither I came at last, to the uttermost foundations of stone. He was with me still. His fire was quenched, but now he was a thing of slime, stronger than a strangling snake. We fought far under the living earth, where time is not counted. Ever he clutched me, and ever I hewed him, till at last he fled into dark tunnels. They were not made by Durin's folk, Gimli, son of Glóin. Far, far below the deepest delving of the dwarves, The world is gnawed by nameless things. Even Sauron knows them not. They are older than he. Now, naturally, you won't be able to use such language in your book about modern-day Boy Scouts. Set up thy tent, Gimli, son of Glóin, and hand me thy marshmallow, yea, even that marshmallow that has passed out of all knowledge of time. But enjoying the language you read gives you a feel for it. Delightful sentences and dancing language can be found anywhere, even in business books. One of the simplest, yet best pearls of advice is to vary the length of your sentences. If you have a couple of long sentences in a row, try to use a short one next. Tolkien did that quite often in the passage before, and top modern non-fiction writers do it too, if you're looking for it. Another good technique is simply to read your writing out loud. Doing so shows up repetitions of a word, which you may not have heard, as it were, reading within your own mind. You might find that you've used a word like actually 3 times in a paragraph. It jumps out at you if you can hear it. I think the best book to read on this topic is Steven Pinker's The Sense of Style. You don't even need to read the entire book. Just the first 50 pages will do, and they will transform how you think about getting across ideas. I tend to recommend it to speakers too. Here's the gist of it. Pinker points out that the human brain is perfectly capable of processing abstract representation. We can make sense of things like charts and graphs and numbers and dry description, but it doesn't light us up. The human mind doesn't love it. So what does? What gets the fires going? How do you truly make your ideas come alive? It's actually relatively simple. You need to help your reader to see moving images. That's it. They must see something happen in the theatre of their imagination. Things must do things that can be, as it were, viewed in a sequence. Use that simple insight, that basic formula, and your writing will never be the same again. Pinker shows how this applies even in textbooks, academic journals, political editorials, and scientific descriptions. There's nothing juvenile about it. It's actually high-level writing, and the ability to do it well is a sign of intelligence. It's also just wonderful for the reader. It is the difference between saying, "The early universe was dark and empty," versus saying, "Picture yourself moving through a vast and utterly lightless emptiness. You turn in all directions, but there is simply nothing to be seen." Please do not edit that paragraph for scientific accuracy. The point is just how it expresses an idea in picture story form. The human mind loves to think in these mini picture stories. So don't just describe a thing. Make it move. Add tension. Make a small sequence play out of it. Illustrate it with a dynamic. The brain loves that, and the reader will thank you for it. In my related world of public speaking, we often say that the best communicators speak in stories, and that a good speech is just this: make a point, tell a story. Make another point, tell another story. As formulas for writing go, that's a very good one. Stories are the medium of human communication. I encourage you to use this formula. Make your point and then tell a story, as often as possible. Make your point, then make it come alive with a mini illustration that helps the reader to see moving imagery in their mind. If you dissect New York Times bestsellers, you will find that this is almost always the approach. So, what is your primary idea? What are its subset ideas? How can you make each subset idea come alive with a story, illustration, picture metaphor, or spur for movement in the mind of your reader? Stephen King expressed it this way: making people believe the unbelievable is no trick, it's work. Belief and reader absorption come in the details. An overturned tricycle in the gutter of an abandoned neighborhood can stand for everything. Pictures that tell stories, movement in the mind, visual representation of ideas. Do that for each major concept, and that is how you write a book. Now, by all means, pepper it with other things, such as quotes or references. But that really is the heart and soul of it. An idea, and then an illustration that makes that idea come to life. The next useful piece of advice that Pinker gives us regards style. He points out that, generally, the most successful modern writing tends to sound a little like friendly, direct speech between an author and a single reader. It is as though you are talking directly to one person and giving useful advice. It's the difference between those who wish to become formidable leaders should study the craft versus are you inspired to become a powerful leader? What do you need to know? Let's discuss the 5 things that can make the most difference to your efforts. It's personal, intimate, one-on-one, and instructive. Editors tend to favor it, and readers generally prefer it. What about titles? Your premise and the title you finally give your book are closely related. Also, they do something similar, which is to say, they either render your entire project unutterably boring, or they give it twang and make it come to life. Please don't misunderstand. I am not actually talking about choice of topic matter here. You already have a sense of what your book will be about. Instead, here we are talking about how you present that idea. Could you give it a title that makes it unignorable? Give it zip, twang, intrigue, fascination factor. For instance, did you know that your title and premise can actually be confrontational? Editors like that sort of thing, a bold book that makes a stand and ruffles feathers. So do readers. Here is how I explore this idea in What Makes Them Great, in a chapter about getting published. If I told you the premise of a book was, everything we've been taught about childcare for the past 100 years is wrong, could you ignore it? Consider how strong the premise was for a breakaway book like The Da Vinci Code. Everything you know about religion is wrong, set to a series of high-intensity chase scenes. A weak premise is anything that sounds vague and general. It takes long to explain, it doesn't hook interest, and it doesn't seem to hone in on any one interesting thing. There's no snap, no zing. The way in which you state your premise can be interesting or boring, even for the same content. You might title a book, A Social Exploration of the Psychological Conditions Attendant to the Rise of Totalitarianism in 1930s Europe. Boring premise. Or you might express the same idea for the same book with a rather more catchy, Why Hitler Did It. Interesting premise. In the world of non-fiction, here are some premises that I recently found sufficiently strong that I eagerly bought the book or downloaded the audiobook. Being bored might be the most useful thing we can do for our creativity. Bored and brilliant, how spacing out can unlock your most productive and creative self, by Manoush Zomorodi. Or, society focuses on the average majority, but what if you're in the brilliant minority? The Curse of the High IQ by Aaron Clary. Or, almost everything we've been taught about inequality is wrong, and striving to overcome inequality could lead to the most unjust society in human history. Equal is unfair. America's Misguided Fight Against Income Inequality by Don Watkins and Yaron Brook. Or, we lie to everyone, but we don't lie to the internet. It knows us better than anyone. What big data can tell us about ourselves? Everybody lies. Big data, new data, and what the internet can tell us about who we really are, by Steph Stevens Davidovich. Or finally, Real Artists Don't Starve by Jeff Goins. So, what are you writing about? Good. Now, how do you make that interesting? How do you give it zip? How can the title jump off the shelf and yell, "Hey, look over here! Here's an interesting idea"? Do that, and you will increase 3 things. Your chances of being accepted by a publisher, the degree to which your title will appeal to readers, and, finally, the actual quality of your book, in that doing this tightens and frames your concept, rather than allowing it to be loose and hodgepodge. And how do I link the chapters together? If I had to describe my own writing pattern over the course of an entire book, it would go something like this. Make a point, tell a story. New chapter. Make another point, tell another story. New chapter. Make another point, tell another story, and so on until I'm done. If you dissect, say, a Malcolm Gladwell bestseller, that's what he's doing too. You simply add complexity and artistry to this basic formula. For instance, Gladwell may begin by telling a story in a certain way, only to unravel and contradict it later on. In other words, he tricks you. He sets up your expectations in a certain direction, then reveals a twist later on. But don't let that intimidate you. Firstly, that represents quite a high level of artistic development in writing, and with a little practice, it genuinely isn't all that hard to do. Also, it isn't strictly necessary to be such a tricksy little hobbit. For many topics, it is perfectly acceptable to simply introduce your topic, describe it in a straightforward way, say the things that need to be said, and then move on to the next topic. Not every idea requires, nor benefits from, theatrical technique. So, ask yourself, am I playing with the minds of my readers, trying to get them to examine their own beliefs, or just telling them something? You also have some choices and options available to you as to how to link the chapters together. It really depends on your content. Sometimes the chapters don't especially relate to one another. Then each chapter really just becomes a sort of separate essay. You complete one, that's the end of a chapter, and then you begin another. They are, in a sense, separate entities. But often, your book can benefit by a little clever linking of ideas, so that one leads smoothly into the next. This tiny little addition of craftsmanship can make your book more appealing to the reader, and serves as yet another indicator to the editor that you are a professional. To link chapters and ideas, and to segue smoothly between them, think of the way radio announcers do it. That was Bruce Springsteen's Born in the USA. Were you born to travel? Why not enter our contest? That's up next. One idea flows into the next. Granted, this is a supremely cheesy example, but it makes the point. You must simply find some logical way of connecting the previous idea to the following one. Short and sweet will do. A hint at what's coming next. Don't let your links become long and tedious chunks of writing. You can even become artful about it. Take a note from the style of mystery writers, who will conclude the topic of one chapter, then hint at something incredible about to happen in the next, before ending that chapter. This draws the reader from the end of one chapter and into the next, while also providing a logical bridge between them. Jeffrey Deaver is very good at doing this with his fiction. So are Dean Koontz and John Grisham. Finally, try this. Find a high-level non-fiction writer, someone you admire. Flip to the end of their chapters and simply observe how they link one chapter to the next, or if they even do so. Naturally, you can use the simple research technique with anything. Trying to figure out how to write a great opening line? Go read 10 opening lines and see how it's done. Eventually they'll kick you out of the bookstore, but it's fun while it lasts. Trying to work out how to introduce an idea? Open the pages of some published books and scan until you find the place where those authors introduce their ideas. Observe like a literary sponge. The principles very quickly become clear. Plus, it's quite inspiring to flip through many different books and just see how other authors do it. Often, that can ignite your desire to want to write. Language and ideas are beautiful and addictive, and if you study them, immerse yourself in them, they may begin to dance for you, even within you.